having me tonight. I've got one more True Texas Project meeting in Tomball in July. So I made many of these meetings, and they've all been a little bit different. I have to say, this was probably the most inspiring opening so far. So kudos to you guys for your opening. And a lot of what you said resonates very deeply with me. My husband and I just moved here from Indiana, northern Indiana, in the fall. A lot of home and godly. He was fired back last February after I had exposed the global agenda in our local community, exposing the governor, the county council, county commissioners, the mayors, and whatnot, and the whole global agenda. My husband was an OEM supplier sales rep for the RV industry, which is 95-98% captured by the globalists at this point, and most people don't know that. So, 2 days after I gave this presentation, calling them all out, they called him and fired him. So we have lived the price of speaking out. So we moved here to Texas, and it took him a little while, but he's now employed, thankfully. The Lord has provided a job, and we're just trusting that he's going to open the floodgates, because unexpectedly, January 31st, I then lost my job. So we are living by faith and by trust for the first time in our nearly 35-year marriage. So, wow. What a challenge it has been, but the Lord has provided, and we can continue to trust that he will. So what you're going to see tonight is just one component of the global presentation that I do. I just took out the education piece for you guys, and hopefully you get some useful information out of it. I trust you will. I come at this piece a bit differently than some others do. I'm here to show you the global network behind it all and show you how these puzzle pieces fit together. Okay? Others will break down the components and the nuts and bolts of this. You're going to get a good look at the overall agenda. So I am Rhonda Miller, CEO of Purple for Parents United, which is a grassroots organization. We initially started out exposing the educational system and the social emotional learning, the brainwashing, and the sexual grooming. How many of you have heard of Alfred Kinsey? Alfred Kinsey had set up camp in Indiana at Indiana University. It was our organization in 2023, not only did we repeal Indiana's loophole, which allowed our schools to give pornography, we had a defense to prosecution, you had an affirmative defense, but we also, for the first time ever, defunded the Kinsey Institute from taxpayer dollars. So that was a huge undertaking for our organization, and we succeeded. Now we work with the comptroller and the attorney general to make sure that IU is not funneling money through that institute in the back door. And we will be traveling to DC with an international group the end of September through the 1st of October when the WHO, the World Health Organization, comes in to our country, and we're going to stand together and call for an investigation of the Kinsey Institute once and for all. It was nearly done in 95, and the government stopped it, so we're going back after it. Been an independent researcher since 2012, 2013. We started seeing a change in our oldest daughter, whom was captured by the educational system. We have 3 children, 2 older girls, and then our son moved down here with us. He is now 20. And so our 2 oldest girls went through the public education system, and our oldest one was captured in college. And we've lived the price. My husband will say, I will celebrate our 35-year anniversary in October. Woo. I know, right? Woohoo! Today is world, that's a bit of an accomplishment, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
So for legal protections, I do have to tell you all videos and pictures that you're going to see are for illustrative and educational purposes. Just want to make that clear. I started the presentation asking 3 simple questions. Are you concerned about what's happened to our country? And are you concerned about the current state of education? And are you concerned about your children and grandchildren's future? And I would say we all can say yes to those questions, correct? So where do we begin? Well, let's start at the very top. Because I said I'm going to show you something a little bit different tonight than what you probably are expecting. We're going to start at the very top. These names on the umbrella are some of the bloodline families at the very top of the scale that are controlling things, okay? They're the ones who essentially set up the outlying entities you're looking at there. The Committee of 300, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the World Economic Forum, the Club of Rome, the League of Nations, the World Health Organization, the Tavistock Institute, and they're funneling everything that they plan to do up through the United Nations. Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030. I'm sure some of you have probably heard of that. Sustainable Development Goals is what they're implementing, and tonight we're going to take a look at Sustainable Development Goal number 4, which is education. But before we go into that, let's look at some scripture. Isaiah 5:13. Therefore my people have gone into captivity because they have no knowledge. When you leave here tonight, my hope is that you take away more knowledge than you came in with, understanding who's really driving what's happening with education. Okay? And then Proverbs 24, 5 and 6, a wise man is full of strength, and a man of knowledge enhances his might, for by wise guidance you can wage your war. And in abundance of counselors there is victory. Well, first of all, I think we can all acknowledge we are at war. Okay? So as we're seeing, as people are banding together, they're becoming educated, they're acquiring more knowledge, they're linking arms, and they're starting to stand up and push back. And that's where we're starting to see, ever so slightly, some of those changes that are taking place. And those are victories. Okay? That only comes by uniting together and standing together. And then Ephesians 6:12 says, for our wrestling is not against flesh and blood, but against the principalities, against the powers, against the world rulers of this darkness, against the spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. It is ultimately a spiritual battle that we are fighting. So let's take a look at the Rockefeller family, and David Rockefeller in particular. Remember the names on the umbrella. Okay? We talk about the Rockefeller family. I would encourage you to get a copy of Gary Allen's The Rockefeller File and really understand more about this family. David Rockefeller himself said, some even believe we are a part of a secret cabal, working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists, and conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated, global, political, and economic structure. A one world, if you will. If that is the charge, I stand guilty, and I'm proud of it. So he's admitting that's what they're doing. And unbeknownst to many of us, we are in the midst of an economic war as well. Okay? But what I want you to understand is there was an agreement between the Rockefellers and the Carnegies. Most of you probably heard about Carnegie, right? Carnegie was to go after international education. Rockefeller was to go after domestic education. There was an agreement between the two. So what's happening in our country is happening in other countries. And now that we are part of an international network that's trying to push back internationally, we're having conversations about the same things that are happening here, that are happening in Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, and others. Okay? But what I want you to understand is David Rockefeller was an honorary chairman of the Council on Foreign Relations. He was a founder and honorary chairman of the Trilateral Commission, a U.S. founding member of the Bilderberg Group. And if you're on X, all of a sudden there's a lot of chatter about the Bilderberg Group. Most people have no idea what that is. Class A director of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. The Federal Reserve is anything but federal. Okay? It's a private bank that has been controlling the economic side of our country for decades. Also, I would encourage you to get a copy of Foundations, Their Power and Influence, written by Renee Wormser. He was a counsel to the Reese Committee that was established years ago to investigate all of these nonprofits and NGOs that were working behind the scenes. So as you hear about U.S. aid, this is essentially what he was uncovering then, and the government shut him down. Okay? What he determined through his research was that constitutionally we have three branches of government, right? These people are so powerful, they're essentially the fourth branch, and nobody knew they were operating. They are built around an interlocking network of social re-engineering. That is what they've been doing to all of us, is socially re-engineering us, our country, and our children. This right here is the most powerful network. How many of you have heard of Arabella Advisors? So I uncovered them years ago when I was doing some research, because we live in Indiana, red state, right? Until I was fighting against our own Republican Party and protecting children against pornography. Third year around, it had enough, and I started creating splash charts, which are back, some of them back on the table. They're up on our website as well. You're free to look those up and print those off if you would like, or grab a copy tonight. And I uncovered Arabella Advisors, but I really didn't understand what exactly it was until I had the honor of meeting Scott Walter, who wrote the book Arabella. I met him before we moved down here and had a conversation with him at a private dinner I was invited to, and told him how I was using their spin-off website called influencewatch.org. It's an incredible website to go in and untangle all of these connections. And that's what my splash charts are built on, is their research. So you see this right here, this light's not going to work. The lighter circles, okay, are right out of his book. So let's go through them. Arabella Advisors was established in 2005 by a young man named Eric Kessler. He has some interesting connections, to say the least. So then a year later, in 2006, they set up the New Venture Fund, which is their legacy fund. It's a very, very powerful arm of Arabella. Okay? They were essentially established for one of their main purposes was to infiltrate the churches with the environmental gospel, the social justice gospel. They even have a toolkit for pastors to use to preach from. Okay? So let's talk about the North Fund. The North Fund was established as a 501c4 in 2018. It has a board member, Christine Uribe, I think is how you pronounce her name. She's a National Education Association union organizer. So is it any wonder that Randy Weingarten from the AFT was rallying the troops for No King's Day? The teachers' unions are involved in Arabella. Okay? Then you have the 1630 Fund. That also shows up in a lot of this dark money funneling. You have the Hopewell Fund. It was established by Warren Buffett to promote abortion. Okay? Then you have the Windward Fund. It was established by the Rockefellers, Kellogg's, and the Waltons. And they, along with the New Venture Fund, share a board member. Harry Drucker is a trustee of the Nature Conservancy. The Nature Conservancy is anything but conservative. The Nature Conservancy is controlled by these globalists. And I was just reading tonight, doing some research on one of these indices I'm going to talk about in a minute, and realizing that he's very much tied to the Nature Conservancy as well. So let's go down to the big donors. Usual suspects: Gates, Ford, Rockefeller, Warren Buffett, William and Flora Hewlett, and then David and Lucille Packard. That is the Hewlett-Packard Company. W.K. Kellogg, Robert Wood Johnson, and the Weiss Foundation. For Hans-Jörg Weiss, who we'll talk about at the end, he served a very specific purpose in this. Okay, and then you have the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. They raise more money together than the two political parties. That is how powerful Arabella Advisors is. Okay? So let's delve into Sustainable Development number 4 and understand what these internationalists are really doing with education. So quality education says this in the UN Agenda 2030. The all learners are to acquire the knowledge and skills to promote sustainable development. Okay? They are to learn they are global citizens and how the cultural diversity contributes to sustainable development. And then they are built and upgrade educational facilities that are inclusive. So the reasons why they're opening up the bathrooms, the locker rooms, the sports teams, the travel trips, all of that is because it was required in Sustainable Development number 4. Okay? We're going to start with this video here of Bill Gates in 2009, and I want you to listen to what he says very carefully. First of all, I want you to pay attention to when he smirks, and we're going to talk about that when it's over.
In terms of standards, the state-led Common Core State Standards Initiative is developing clear, rigorous standards that will match the best in the world. Last month, 46 governors and chief state school officers made a public commitment to embrace those standards. This is encouraging, but identifying common standards is just the starting point. We'll only know if this effort has succeeded when the curriculum and tests are aligned to these standards. Secretary Arne Duncan recently announced that $350 million of the stimulus package will be used to create just these kinds of tests. Next generation assessments aligned to the Common Core. When the tests are aligned to the common standards, the curriculum will line up as well. And it will unleash a powerful market of people providing services for better teaching. For the first time, there'll be a large uniform base of customers looking at using products that can help every kid learn and every teacher get better. Imagine having the people who create great online video games applying their intelligence to online tools that pull kids in and make algebra and other subjects fun.
So let's break that down. Did you notice when he smirked?
He smirked early on.
Yeah. Did you catch what he said?
Something about
States.
It was governor-led. Common Core was governor-led. He was lying, and he knew it. Because he had an agreement with the United Nations to push and advocate for Common Core. Okay? Did you catch what else he said? They'll know they're successful when the tests and the curriculum and the standards all align. They write the tests. They control the publishing companies, which means they control the curriculum. And they, through the teachers' unions, essentially control the standards. So they know they're successful when they've aligned to all three, and there's no escape. Okay? How do I know that it was not governor-led? Well, let's take a look. This is Condoleezza Rice. Many of us know who that is, right? She was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission. As a Republican, you can see it didn't matter which party you're on, because both parties are in on it. Because Communist Goal number 15 says capture one or both political parties in the U.S. And if you want a copy of the 45 Communist Goals, it's back there on the table. You're free to take it. Okay? She helped draft this Independent Task Force Report number 68 in 2012, just 3 years later, when many states were getting pushback from the people on Common Core, and many of them just renamed it. That's what Indiana did, College and Career Ready. You guys named it College, Career, Military Ready. Indiana is now implementing the military part of it. Okay? But in this task force report, it says, with the support of the federal government and industry partners, wonder who those are, states should expand Common Core state standards. So she's saying, just 3 years later, after you heard Bill Gates talk about Common Core, that they were to expand it. Well, I wonder what that looks like. I'm going to show you what it probably looks like. So what happens in the classroom when they implement this? Remember, the goal number 4 is all learners are to acquire the knowledge and promote sustainable development. Well, this was given in a 7th grade language arts class. Instead of reading classical literature, no, they're dissecting the sustainable development goals and writing about those. Wonder why that would be. I guess we should be thankful they weren't reading pornography for this assignment. But nonetheless, in a very small conservative community, the same community, that if you saw what was happening on Twitter, the teacher who had the 8647 t-shirt standing in front of the White House just a couple weeks ago on a DC field trip, how many of you saw that? That was from this very same school, in an Amish area in Indiana. That's where this assignment came from. So what's happening there? Imagine what else is happening. Okay? They were to dissect, read and dissect the Sustainable Development Goals in 7th grade English. Then, the very same school, just a few months ago, passed out this in a 5th grade math class, 15-minute cities. What if you could go everywhere you wanted or needed without using a car? It says cars are convenient, but they produce more pollution than other modes of transit. Too much pollution harms people's health and contributes to climate change. What does it have to do with math? They're indoctrinating the kids in every subject. Okay? So they implemented Common Core. Next came social emotional learning. Okay? Social emotional learning, as many of us pushed back on it, you were told, let's just teaching your children to be kind and empathetic. No, it really wasn't. Because it came right from UNESCO. As you can see right there, social emotional learning must be a priority for transformed early education. And when they talk about early education, they're not talking about kindergartners. Nope, they're talking about preschool, which I believe is why we now have government-funded daycare. Mm-hmm. The sooner they get their hands on the kids and their brains, the easier it is to brainwash them. Mm-hmm. And not have to undo what mom and dad have taught them, or grandma and grandma. Okay? The bottom left, you see social emotional learning skills for training for professionals. So for professional development, they're all being taught how to implement social emotional learning. And I'll watch this happen in Indiana, and I'll talk a little bit more about it in just a minute. But they transformed education through social emotional learning. And most people didn't understand what that really meant. So as I was going and traveling with my colleague, as we were exposing it, she was seeing what was happening in the school herself. We had to break it down for people. What you heard and you saw, what the Rockefellers and the globalists intended was social re-engineering, right? Well, how are they doing it with the children? Well, let's talk about it. Social. What do they want? Social change. That's why it says SECUS, Sex Information Education Council of the U.S., SECUS for social change. Okay, sex ed for social change. That's what they want. How are they doing it? Well, they're emotionally manipulating the kids. Well, how are they doing that? Through the lessons and learning the curriculum. You with me? So the lessons, the learning, the curriculum, the propaganda in the schools, the classrooms, the hallways, whatnot, they're emotionally manipulating the children to create that social change. And then what they do is they march them down to the Capitol or the State House. I watch this. They give them signs to carry, chants to repeat, and then they put them in the podiums in front of the committee to testify against parents' rights. I saw that myself. That's essentially what they're doing. Okay? The World Economic Forum is also using social emotional learning through technology. So the World Economic Forum and the United Nations are behind social emotional learning. Okay? Here you can see right here, this article you can still find on the website. Social emotional learning for SDGs. Why social emotional learning is necessary to achieve those sustainable development goals. Well, when you're teaching kids that cars are bad, you're tugging on those emotions, right? You're telling them they shouldn't drive cars because they're dangerous and they cause too much pollution. Okay? Emotional resilience that promotes pro-social behavior. If you read the book Brutal Minds by Stanley Ridgely, and I encourage you to do so, it's a really fascinating read. He breaks down a 3-step process. They unfreeze the children with the values, attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs that you've sent them to school with. They change them, and then they refreeze them with what the government wants them to learn and to know. And they data track them every step of the way. Okay? You're going to see a little bit an example of that. But that is the process they use. Okay? Who's behind the social emotional learning program? So this is CASEL. It stands for Collaborative for Academic Social and Emotional Learning. And you can see there in the center, and the circles around it, everything outlined in red is Arabella. In fact, Arabella directly. Okay? Off to the left, you see Lilly Pharmaceutical, or Lilly Endowment, and Lilly Counseling Initiative. Indiana is home to one of the big pharmaceutical companies called Lilly. Mm-hmm. Lilly is incredibly powerful, buys up a lot of our legislators, no different than down here in Texas. Okay? But Lilly, for those of you older generation, will probably recall the LSD experiments, the MK Ultra experiments. The CIA tasked Lilly with coming up with the LSD for those experiments. Those are mind control experiments. So is it any wonder that Lilly was bribing the schools behind the scenes to transform education through social emotional learning? Because that is what they did. In 2001, they started dumping millions of dollars into the University of Indianapolis. Along comes the Gates Foundation, Knowledge Works, and the Lumina Foundation. All globalist foundations that have tentacles tied to Arabella. They transformed education, and the reason I can tell you this is because in our school passed a referendum that included mental health counselors a few years later, after the money went out in 2017 and 2018. I acquired a binder disc of emails, charts, graphs, and reports of how they were implementing the grant money that came from Lilly. And they were required to go on a 3-year training cycle to implement this transformation. With the radical you're going to see here in just a minute. So this is what they were doing behind the scenes that most people didn't know that was going on. So I was on a crusade to educate Hoosiers about this transformation and what was really going on with Lilly. You don't take Lilly on without getting some pushback. That's for sure. Because even the governors are bought off in Indiana through Lilly. Okay? But this is a real consequence of what we've been doing behind the scenes. One of their most popular programs, Second Steps. This is the one that our founder had seen in her school when she went back after staying home with her kindergartner. And she uncovered what it was really about: anti-racism and anti-bias resources. A focus on transformative social emotional learning. Okay, this is what this is all about. We're committed to addressing racial injustice and help you drive real change in your school communities. And I ask people, who's determining what that real change is? Is it you? I mean, your property taxes are going sky high. Are you determining what that real change is? No. No. As you go to school boards, I'm sure you can see who's really in charge. Okay? Then you go to the National Equity Project, which, by the way, is a spinoff of the Southern Public Law Center, which in 2023 in our battle against pornography intensified in Indiana, they labeled our organization a hate group. I wore that with dignity. And then went and exposed who was really behind Southern Poly Law Center. They canceled our website, they canceled our ticket sales of 2 conferences we had going on. But I lashed out and I fought back. And I exposed who's really behind the Southern Poly Law Center. But it says there on this website, our current systems perpetuate inequity by design. Says who? Who determines that? And then it says it takes rebel leadership to abolish unjust systems and catalyze positive change. Again, you're the taxpayer. You're footing the bill for these schools. Are you determining that? No. They're doing it all behind the scenes and locking you out of the schools. Then it says it is our legacy to fight for our collective freedom. We will win. They're determined, and they're telling us what they're going to do. So who's helping to do this? Well, this is Trish Hatch. This is who Lily paid through their grant money, because grant money always comes with strings, right? Especially when you're dealing with these globalists. They determine the data, they determine the purpose of all that grant money. So through the Lilly Endowment Counseling Initiative, Trish Hatch, the radical with ties to Obama, and the Arnie Duncan Department of Education. Now you heard Bill Gates talk about Arnie Duncan, right? Well, they paid this radical to come through the schools and transform them, okay? For 3 years, she spent time in Indiana through that grant money. So as COVID happened, and people started waking up in Hoosierland, I'm jumping for joy, because I'm like, I've been trying to tell you this is what's going on. And they started seeing what the transformation was looking like. But guess what? In 2022, she was here in Austin. She was down here in Austin, and she was doing the exact same thing. What does it mean that she's doing? She's a former vice president of the American School Counselors Association. How many of you know what that is? The American School Counselors Association is incredibly powerful and incredibly influential. She was training our schools on the position statements. There's about 50 of them. I really encourage you to go to the American School Counselors Association website and look up and read these position statements, because there's one on transgender, how they were to socially transgender a child through school, not tell the parents, keep it hidden, change their name, and if they want to use pronouns, they should use the pronouns. This is what was behind it. And this is what people started seeing during and after COVID. But she's incredibly radical. As you can see here, Texas Christian University is implementing ASCA model. The Christian schools and the Christian universities are really no different. You'd be hard-pressed to find a really good one. You can see right there the Texas Model for Comprehensive School Counseling Programs, 5th edition in 2018. Now, the Lilly money went out 2017 and 2018 in Indiana. So what happened down here? They were transforming your counseling program as of 2018. And I know how much you all love Mike Morass, so I added him to the slide there. It says in section 5, the recommended curriculum resulted from collapsing the previous 7 curricular content areas. Anybody know what those were? So what did they get rid of? The recommended curriculum. I can imagine where that came from. Resulted from collapsing the previous 7 curricular content areas and incorporating non-repetitive student competencies. Because we went to social emotional learning and cultural competencies. They go hand in hand. Okay? Identified in the American School Counselor Association national model. So this is how influential ASCA is behind the scenes. Okay? So they dumb the kids down, Common Core, social emotional learning, taking away the basics, bringing in all this emotional nonsense to manipulate their mind. So kids can't read, can't function. So what happened next? Well, they rolled out science of reading. So in Indiana, in 2022, Lilly and our communist governor at that time, Eric Holcomb, they band together and celebrated $111 million dumped into this science of reading. Nobody really paid attention. I had known about it, but I wasn't sure exactly what it meant until 2023, the legislative session starting in January. Multiple bills in the House and the Senate started incorporating science of reading. So my phone starts blowing up from our team going, Rhonda, what's going on with science of reading? I'm like, I don't know, but let's find out. So I go back to the article, and I'm like, who are they working with, and what is Lilly really doing? Well, Lilly was coordinating with the Hunt Institute to implement this. of J.B. Hunt. Most of us all know. The Hunt Institute. Okay? And as you can see there, in the outline red, is Arabella, behind the Hunt Institute. Okay? That's who's behind science of reading. Well, Rhonda, they're telling us it's phonics. Well, okay, so we had our 50-year educator take a look. I said, Mary, go break down science of reading. She's been in public, charter, private, parochial, you name it. She's been in all school settings, so she knows her stuff. She's 50-year educator in her 80s. So she broke it down and did an analysis for us, which is up on our website. So if you really want to know what is behind science of reading, you can go look that up. Okay? But these are the people behind it that are funding it. So if you trust Arabella, well, I'm sure you buy into science of reading. I, for one, do not. Here's what the Arabella-funded Hunt Institute is doing. Okay? You can see here, educational outcomes in El Paso County and their economic impact, a comprehensive K through 12 performance analysis. What are they really doing? In order to have analysis, you have to be collecting data, right? It's massive data collecting on our kids. You can see here, early childhood landscape in Texas, that's your preschool, okay? Well, don't worry, in Missouri, they're doing home visits. So we're not much that further away than having home visits here, like they have in other countries, to make sure that homeschoolers are implementing the very same thing that government schools are doing. Because in Missouri, the Hunt Institute's already going in, doing home visits. And then, so parents are pulling their kids out, right? They're fleeing, they're realizing there's a real problem in government schools, because they're not broken, they're doing exactly what they're designed to do. So, the government created the problem, the government's coming in with a solution. So as we watch the explosion of school choice take place here, take place in Indiana, take place across the country, this is another agenda. As you can see, who's behind it, okay? They're chasing after the parents who are pulling their kids out and dangling a little carrot of money in front of them. So let's break it down. So this, on the left here, you see the center picture of Corey DeAngelis with Governor Abbott. Okay? Corey DeAngelis is a senior fellow of the Reason Foundation. The Reason Foundation has received $1.7 million from the Laura and John Arnold Foundation, who established the Arnold Ventures in 2019 for social change. Okay? They gave money to the New Venture Fund. Remember, the New Venture Fund is the legacy fund of Arabella, which goes right back. So let's go to the right. So you have Jeff Goss. Many of you may have heard of him, dumping over $10 million into Abbott's coffers to promote school choice. He's the founder of this Susquehanna International Group, which I'm not sure what exactly that is, but they gave $3.3 million to this Philadelphia Schools Partnership, which is supported by Laura and John Arnold Foundation. Again, they created Arnold Ventures in 2019 for social change, which gave money to New Venture Fund, which is Arabella. So you see who's really behind school choice. So then you go to the right. So the UNESCO is behind it as well, because Save the Children organization sounds very, save the children, protective of children, right? Good thing. No, that's what they do. They use these names, you wouldn't think anything about until you really start digging. So they were given consultative status to the United Nations Economic and Social Council. You can see the outlying funders of Save the Children: BlackRock, USAID, Open Society, Ford Foundation, Gates Foundation, and David and Lucille Packard. All Arabella. Okay? Jeff Goss is a huge supporter of Save the Children. So you can see, again, you break down Abbott's connections, and then you look at who's really behind it at the global level is UNESCO, the United Nations. Okay? Again, parents are pulling their kids out because they realize something seriously is wrong. They want their tax dollars, which I don't blame them. The government knows that. The government dangles the carrots. Parents accept it, go into these private schools, and what's going to happen? The government will have captured the private schools. That's what's going to happen. And now they're dangling the carrot in front of homeschoolers as well. So in 2023, as we were working to protect our children from pornography, I got tired of fighting with these Republicans and said to one of our team members, I knew they've been using the publishing companies for propaganda, they have for decades, not only using our TV system, Mockingbird Media, if you're paying attention, but these publishing companies that put out some of the most nasty books that you're finding, okay, are put out by publishers that are essentially connected to the World Economic Forum and the United Nations. So they're using this perverted material to propagate our children with all kinds of deviant behavior. Same publishing companies are putting out the stuff on climate change. All that nonsense, okay? The ones in yellow have had representatives that have sat on the Council on Foreign Relations. So that tells you the highest tentacles of who's really putting out this material that your children are reading. One of the entities that they bring into the schools as well, this is David Radcliffe, New Community Project. He travels the globe and travels the world, actually, teaching children they can dumpster dive for food. That is the picture he shows them. And I don't know about you, the last time I looked at a dumpster, it did not look like that. But he does tell them they should be careful because they might find a used pizza box with used needles in it. So he does warn them at least. But he does turn around and tell them his favorite places to go find all his good food. So the next year he came in, he wanted to sit down and have a meeting because they had pushed back and they were forced to give it out. So he wanted to meet. I said, okay, fine. We'll meet. I parked his backside of the coffee shop right downtown to the stoplight in our little Amish community. And I said, okay, we're having a conversation. So you want to watch a liberal TED explode, that's actually kind of fun. Because as we're sitting there talking and the traffic is stopped, and people are in their cars by themselves, he's about to come unglued. Because that person's wasted energy. They should have more people in that car. I finally said to him, how did you get here? Well, I flew. Okay. Did you ride a bicycle from the airport? How did you get from the airport down here? I drove a car. By yourself? Yeah. Really? So that you can come tell our children they can't do that? Or you can get mad at this young woman out here in this car by herself? I said, do you not find it hypocritical that when you jump in a jet, travel the globe, you are wasting all kinds of jet fuel to go tell people they can't live freely? So you don't find that hypocritical? No. I said, the conversation's over. You obviously don't believe in freedom and liberty. I do. You don't belong here. Get out. Conversation ended very abruptly. But that is the kind of nonsense that is being brought in. The math teacher who has the Earth Club brought him in. That tells you what you need to pay attention to. And we cannot go any further until we talk about this. The pornography and the sexual grooming of our children comes from Alfred Kinsey and our government. Upper left-hand corner, you see a picture of Alfred Kinsey. Before we had Jeffrey Epstein, we had Alfred Kinsey. Mm-hmm. The CIA worked with him to pervert our nation and was funded by the Rockefellers. He's meeting with erotic filmmaker Kenneth Inger in Aleister Crowley's satanic temple in Sicily. I can only imagine what they're talking about. Okay? Aleister Crowley worships Baphomet, or worshipped. The guy's dead. He worshipped Baphomet. The bottom left-hand corner, you see Satanists in the state of Washington when they passed.
You were saying something that the government shut everything down.
Yeah.
Victoria. Well, it should be there, I mean, obviously. Hey, oh, yeah. Check where it touches the computer, that weird coloration usually touch or something like that. Do you have a key line up there? Yes, you do. Look at you.
All right, let's try this again.
No signal. It was working fine. Uh-huh.
So the Satanists, I'll tell you about that picture while we're putting it up. So the Satanists were outside the Capitol in the state of Washington. Several years ago, they passed the bill to sexually pervert their children with comprehensive sex ed. Okay, I know some of my colleagues down here pushing back in Austin to prevent sex ed from coming into schools, comprehensive sex ed, from coming in.
We're good.
So the Satanists,
Thanks, Dan.
Satanists here, thank you. The Satanists stood out the street, and the minute that bill was passed, they marched themselves into the Capitol, stood around that emblem, and started doing their satanic chant. We had a colleague out there who captured this shot and said it to all of us. He says, guys, we're not dealing with normal behavior. This is what we're dealing with. This is a satanic sex cult that we're dealing with. This is coming after our children. And thank the good Lord, this is Supreme Court just ruled in favor of the state of Tennessee to ban transgender surgeries for children.
Right.
That is a major victory.
Right.
Bottom right hand corner, you can see we now have satanic clubs coming up in our schools. The founder of the Satanic Temple in Indiana is a 4th grade teacher out of Fort Wayne. So that tells you the level of evil that's right inside school. This is essentially what they're feeding into. By sexually grooming our children. I take this book with me every time I go to the Capitol. It's about this thick. It's one of 5 books that came out around the time of COVID. I grabbed all 5 of them. This one deals with our country, North America's shameful pedophile scandals like never before. It calls out some of the highest officials in our country and how they have been active behind the scenes promoting this pedophilia. Okay, you'll be shocked at the names you hear in reading this book. Pedophilia Empire, Satan, Sodom, and the Deep State. Last time I was down there to testify in the Senate Education Committee in front of Senator Creighton, Senator Paxton, sitting off to the right-hand side, strong supporter of protecting kids, right? Got her attention, and she wanted to know more about this book. I went and got out of the committee room because she pulled me out to the hallway, sat me on the bench and said, I want to know about this book. And I told her, I started telling her when I learned about it, how I got my hands on it, and what it talks about. So she had to get up and leave, and I said, her LA sitting there, she said, I want to know more about this book. I had given her my card, given her a free copy of the Seeker's Circle, which is back there. And so I got that book, and I made that young man read one of the most horrific things I think I've ever read myself. He turned as white as a ghost. And he goes, oh my goodness. Yeah, this is what we're dealing with. When we pervert our kids and don't stop it, we're feeding right into this nonsense and this pure evil. This is the next project that I feel the Lord is putting me on, is to break this down and put this into a PowerPoint to help Americans understand this is happening at the highest levels of our government. So we have to talk about SECUS, the Sex Information Education Council of the U.S. This was established by Hugh Hefner, who had read Kinsey's books and decided he was doing everything wrong and he was going to become Kinsey's pamphleteer. This is when he started Playboy. Most people do not know that. So then he gives the seed money to Mary Calderon over here on the right. She was a former medical director of Planned Parenthood, okay, a humanist. He gave her the seed money and they established SECUS at the Kinsey Institute to be the sex ed arm of Kinsey. So all of Kinsey's crimes against children, his perversion against children, then went into the schools. Okay? Under sex ed. So, if you can grab a copy of the SECUS Circle back there, I think I have like 3 copies with me, for a donation of $30. This is where this network came from. This is an outline right out of Claire Chambers' book. She's now a friend of mine. She talks about how they overtook the publishing companies with this perversion. The religious institutions, okay, the churches have been infiltrated with this as well. Many of them will now march alongside, especially in Indiana, Lilly Pharmaceutical. They will march along with their church parade, their church floats in the pride parade. Okay, this is why. Then you have the education system, you have the financial system, and you have the medical field. You know, all the transgender, okay, stuff that they're doing to children, because Alfred Kinsey worked with John Money, who performed the first transgender surgery on a little boy, twin boy, who had a botched circumcision. Ended up being a major disaster. But the things he did to those kids were horrible. Okay? So the medical field was brought into this, and it's all about population control. Okay? They're all working together. They're all humanists, communists, and Marxists that set up SECUS. There's a diagram back there on the founders. But you'll get all that information in that book.
Tim McGraw and Bayfield.
I'm sorry?
Tim McGraw and Bayfield are in on that?
No, this is McGraw-Hill, the publishing company.
Oh, okay. Cause
Yeah. Yeah, no, this is the publishing company, McGraw-Hill, any of the textbooks. So we also have the whole school, whole community, whole child aspect, where they're coming in and they're setting up medical and mental health clinics in the schools. Okay, you guys all aware of that? How many of you have seen the mind polluters?
Yeah,
The mind polluters? So this is a clip out of the mind polluters. Monica Klein is here in Texas. I want you to listen to this.
To see this in action, or to see a program even, is you can go to the CDC and look up a program that they have called Whole Child, Whole School, Whole Health, or Whole Community, something like that. And they have a virtual school so that you can see what this would look like. And what it is that they have school-based health centers. And they want to have dental care in the school. They want a general practitioner in the school. They want a family planning practitioner in the school. So they're going to give your children birth control and all of that. Because of the transgender movement, that would include providing hormone replacement therapies as well. They have mental health in the school. And so they're also calling for extended school hours. So they want your children to go to school earlier and come home later in the evening. So in other words, it is the complete systematic institutionalization of your children in this CDC program. And parents are loving it. They're loving it because, well, now I don't have to get off of work to send my kid to the doctor because they can do it while they're in the school. And they give them free meals. And, oh, this issue that we have with depression and suicide, well, now they can get counseling at the school because there's mental health providers there. Well, I'm really worried that my child might become sexually active. Well, no problem. The school is providing them with condoms and birth control. And so we're seeing that what we, on one hand, when we're not really being vigilant, we're literally giving over our children into the hands of the state in these programs that seem to be helpful, but truly are ending the privatization of family.
And she's right. That is what's happening. And they're setting it up. This community school will be the control hub of the entire area. That is what they're doing. And they will usurp parents' rights if we're not very, very careful. Okay? That is where we're headed. Essentially, this is where what we're on. The road from freedom. Education's march toward socialism. You can start here with Horace Mann, and you run all the way through to 2015 with the ESSA. Okay? Doesn't matter if you're red or blue, both parties have been in on this from the very get-go. You can actually even go back to early 1800s when Robert Owen set up camp in Indiana, New Harmony, which is a pretty creepy place. I actually have pictures of it. He tried to set up the first communist commune in the state of Indiana. I don't know what is it about my former state. But he wasn't successful. 18 months later, people weren't going along with it. They didn't want no part of it, right? So he leaves, goes over. Next thing you know, they launch Prussian education because they linked arms with other socialists over there. And then the next thing you know, they come back over here with their socialist Marxist ideology and started working in the educational system there on out because they knew they had to take education down in order to take the country down without firing shots. Okay? This is where we are. We grow from freedom. We have a trifold back there that breaks this down. There's also this diagram. There's also, you can find it on our website as well. This is essentially, wrapped up in a nutshell, what I just showed you about education. Okay? Prime example of that three-step process: the unfreezing, the changing, and the refreezing. Take a listen.
Good evening. I'm a student at Chapin High School in my senior year, and I've attended schools in the Chapin cluster since kindergarten. This is the first District 5 board meeting I've attended, though I did watch the public participation portion of the meeting that took place on January 8th. I was inspired to come and speak today by my English teachers. In my high school years, I have come to know most of the teachers in the department and found that they are a brilliant and kind group of people who truly do act in the interest of every student. I hold the utmost respect for them, and they have taught me, as they have taught me so much in academics, extracurriculars, and lifelong ethics. I am capable of fully understanding the stress and responsibility felt by teachers, parents, and the members of this board. I have no years of experience being an educator. I have no college degree. I'm not a parent. I'm barely even an adult. I'm just a high school student. I'm here to make a point about the dangerous consequences of book banning in public education, but I first want to share some of my background so that you may get an idea of why this is so important to me. I'm fortunate to have both my parents present and involved in my everyday life. They support me, care for me, and I live a comfortable life. I love both of my parents dearly, but tonight I would like to focus on my father and the concomitantly detrimental effect he has had on my life. He's a conservative, a Republican, and a Christian. For as long as I can remember, he has instilled his political and religious values in me. As a child who unquestioningly admired her father, I took him at his word, and his one-sided bigoted beliefs became ingrained in my identity. When the topic of the 2016 presidential election arose at the 4th grade lunch table, I would recite the arguments my father made in favor of Trump. I ignorantly endorsed a man who would have me suffer and even die in the name of political agendas. At 10 years old, I had no one exposing me to diverse political perspectives. One might argue that a fourth grade classroom is not the place for political discussions, and if one is to arise, the teacher should extricate themselves from the situation and dismiss the topic entirely. If the classroom is not the place for such discussions, then where? The home, my parents failed me in that area of education, and I can assure you that mine were not the only ones. If fourth grade students are old enough to hold conversations about politics and current events themselves, then they are old enough to hear debates that represent both sides and incorporate a variety of viewpoints. I have since needed to reconsider where I stand. When the Democrats who had previously been demonized held in unjustifiable condemnation and immediately dismissed actually aligned with my own morals and reasoning more than Republicans, I found myself at a crossroads. I could either continue in my father's doctrine that required me to follow blindly and ignore irrefutable truths and the principles of democracy, or to pursue my own knowledge and form my own opinions.
I'm going to stop that right there because a loud beep and everybody jumping. That is what that three-step process looks like. And that is what many of us American parents have lived through. She totally flipped against her parents. Did you catch which class it was?
4th grade.
Yep. Which subject?
English.
Right? It goes back to the propaganda. Right back to the propaganda that they're being taught. The unfreezing, the changing, and the refreezing. And she was quite emotional, wasn't she?
She was shaking.
Yeah. So, let's talk about the Tavistock Institute, which is where a lot of this started. It says, page 94, when the technique has been perfected, every government that has been in charge of education for a generation will be able to control its subjects securely without the need of armies or policemen. Imagine 1 million of those individuals set loose. Is it any wonder we saw the riots in COVID? Or we saw no kings? Right? This is what they've done. Intentionally. The social re-engineering of the masses. And then we have Training for Treason. This book was written in 2012, one of the early books that I read as I was doing my research, The Harmful Agenda Behind Education for Sustainability. It says on page 97, we need to change the mindset of the teachers and students. If we can educate them to act different in a different way, then they will go out and advocate different government policies. Was that not what she was just doing? You say it was pretty successful, don't you? But the most important reason we chose to work at the college university level is because that is where the future teachers are being trained. So as many of our good teachers have been pushed out of the system, have either left on their own or been fired, they've been pushed out. And they've replaced them with these radicalized, trained teachers, training them for treason. That is what we're seeing. So, which leads me back to Hans-Georg Wyss. I told you he served a specific purpose in Arabella. They couldn't have pulled off what I just showed you without controlling the elections, without controlling who was in office. He was also responsible for it. We know about George Soros and the CCP, right? But we also have Hans-Georg Wyss. And that was the main purpose of the Wyss Foundation, was to control the elections. He's also a far-left radical environmentalist who's funding the Nature Conservancy and many other deep state cabal entities. He's Swedish. He is not an American citizen. He lives in Wyoming on a visa. And he's controlling who's in office. That's a very scary situation. So where do we go from here? Okay, well, you start by attending these kind of meetings. And I want to thank you for coming out tonight and spending your evening with us and learning about this. Okay, it's the first step. Then we would recommend you adopt a 7-step process, which Truth Texas Project, I believe, has done. Okay, you get connected, you get organized. You implement a plan, figure out whether you're tackling your county council, your pornography in the schools, school boards, whatever, You figure out what the plan is, and you implement it. You do the work. It is hard work, no doubt. Nobody wants to get up and go to those boring school board meetings, and I went to one Monday night, and I watched Kayla Lane get attacked again by the superintendent. Don't worry, I'm gonna have some fun with him. I had Kayla on my podcast today. So we're gonna expose the godly school board. Build the movement. That's the point. Build the movement together, united arm in arm, and you will see those victories we talked about earlier. You review the progress, which you guys I think are doing. You review that, you celebrate your victories. It's all about local empowerment. Because once you see those victories and you start inching your way toward the end goal, you will feel empowered. And that's the whole point. And we recommend you gather the 5 necessary components. Somebody who's got wisdom, wise old sage we call them, wisdom to navigate the treacherous waters, because you're going to get it. You're going to get the attacks. Okay? It's going to get tense. You get a press person, somebody who can handle the press. An energizer, somebody who can organize meetings and whatnot. A researcher, somebody who can go down those rabbit holes and uncover everything. And then you go get a legislator and they'll work with you. And when they see the army you built, chances are you're going to have a good legislator. The whole point is we've got to get back to the Constitution. Okay? This is the problem. They're not complying with the Constitution. So we have to get them to do so. Okay? And educate them. Most of them probably don't even know what they're doing isn't even constitutional. I think they do. But we need to show them. This isn't in the Constitution. You don't have a right to do that. Okay? These are some of our additional resources. There is a paper back there on the table. And then, like I said, if you guys would like those handouts, feel free to take them if you want. If you have a few extra dollars you want to drop in the donation box, that helps me cover the printing and the materials for those. But feel free to take those because I do bring them so you guys can do that. You can walk away with some information in hand. You can visit our website, purple4parentsunited.org. We have a lot of resources out there that I don't have with me, but feel free to download those. All the PDFs are up there so that you can have the information, okay? You can also see Alex Newman. Many of you probably know who that is, Liberty Sentinel. He's putting out some really good information. And then you can go to influencewatch.org, do the deep dive research, which is where these flash charts came from, okay? You can see it on Facebook. We do have a Purple for Parents United Texas Facebook page now that we're trying to build. And then we are launching a new Rumble channel, and we launched our first episode of Unmasked and Unfiltered, and we're going to rip off the Band-Aid and we're going to expose these people for who they are and who's behind them. And so that's going to launch every Wednesday at noon, and I already have Kayla lined up to be launched next Wednesday. So I'm excited about this effort going out. And then we also have these trifolds. We created these. The good Lord downloaded those several weeks back as I was at home with my knee up because I had screwed up my knee at the Apple. So I was able to create these trifolds. Please take those, load it with information, and then if you are able and willing to help sign up and get our organization funded, you can do that with the QR code there. We are going to be visiting DC. I told you with our international group. So we are looking for funding. If you're interested in doing that, we'll be linking arms and going out and calling for a revised effort on HR 2749, which was the 1995 effort to have the Kinsey Institute investigated for the crimes against children and how that influenced every aspect of our country. So they failed to do it in 95 with the defunding in 23. I do believe we have the momentum. And I will tell you that the Supreme Court decision should be coming down anytime that would rule on the case of the pornography industry against Ken Paxton in the state of Texas on the law that you guys passed that required age verification on porn sites. We helped fund the effort to get Audrey Warner's amicus brief. She's a friend of mine from McKinney, Texas. She was the one tasked with the amicus brief exposing all of Kinsey's crimes in front of the Supreme Court for the first time ever. And that is something Dr. Judith Reisman had said for years needed to be done. So that happened on January 15th. We're just waiting on them to come down with the final decision. We do expect them to come down in Texas's favor. And once that happens, that will give us the momentum to go into DC the end of September, 1st of October, to call for that investigation into Kinsey's influence on everything across our country. So if you feel compelled and feel called, we could certainly use some financial support to be able to make that trip. Nehemiah 4:14 says, "And I looked and I rose and said to the nobles and to the officials and to the rest of the people, do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes." We are commanded to stand up and fight. We are not commanded to sit at home watching the brainwash box, which many of our fellow Americans are doing sadly. Or do I need to be sucked up out of here? No, we are called to stand and fight. Okay? And then Esther 4:14, for if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise from the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this. I do believe that's why we're all here. And this is why I stand before you, because this is where the good Lord has put me. And this is where I will stand as long as I am called to do so. So President Kennedy warned us, did he not? For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine. And I just showed you the education component that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. And for that he was killed.
Yes.
He paid the ultimate price. So I want to leave you inspired tonight, though. This is a song by Danny Gokey called Brave. If you haven't heard it, it is incredibly inspiring, so take a listen.